This is the Vegan Pulse. I am your host, Nancy Arenas, sharing stories from all over the world from compassionate individuals. Today, that individual is Tami Hayes. Tami is the founder of 1,000,000 Vegan Grandmothers. She is also a vegan somatic life coach. She consults on hydration, diet, and nutrition. She is a massage therapist and a raw food chef. She is the author of Earthgut, the story of peace, love, and microbes, the journey towards healing, our digestion, and our connection to Earth, available on Amazon. Let me introduce her to you. Hi, Tami. How are you?
I'm great. It's early morning here and it's sunny and we're getting a little bit of rain finally. And I'm in Canada where there's a lot of fires. So we know the climate is shifting.
Oh, so you where all those fires are they getting under control? I hope.
There hasn't been enough rain yet for that to happen, but we're hoping this week some of them will be under control. Yes.
Oh, well, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, let's talk about your journey into veganism.
Great. My favorite subject.
Mine too.
Yeah. Well, I started really getting conscious around food over 30 years ago when my son had a lot of allergies and they wanted to diagnose him with ADHD. And I started buying only organic food, got rid of all the chemicals. We were still eating some flesh food back then, and it seemed to help remarkably. And then almost 20 years ago, I started getting a lot of symptoms of gut dysbiosis. So my gut was really inflamed and I was eating pretty great. I was still eating some flesh and a little bit of secretions of dairy. And so I went to a wellness center, Hippocrates Health Institute, and I had been pretty sick with Crohn's. And within 3 weeks, I felt amazing, drinking wheatgrass, raw vegan. And I had found my answers basically. And then I went on to study with Dr. Gabriel Cousins and the Essenes, and I got a master's in plant-based nutrition and went on to write a book called Earthgut, the story of peace, love, and microbes. Then fast forward a few years later, I met Dr. Sailesh Rao, and I started working with climate healers, and we founded an organization within climate healers called the 1,000,000 Vegan Grandmothers, because grandmother is a very powerful energy for me to be a grandmother, and my grandkids aren't being raised vegan as of yet, but it's the hottest subject in their house. It's like, Oma, do you eat vegan for this? Is this vegan? Is that vegan? Is this healthy? Is that healthy? So I feel the grandmothers are coming together and they're coming back to their role as wisdom carriers and wisdom keepers. A lot of our grandmothers, some of them were very wise and some of them just weren't. They were just kind of following orders. They came out of a wartime when processed food seemed like, whoa, the greatest thing, since sliced bread. And sliced bread wasn't so good either. It was Wonder Bread that never went bad. So it was the time of preservatives and all kinds of stuff. But the wise vegan elders are coming back and they're returning. Mm-hmm.
That is awesome. That is awesome. I want to touch on a couple of things that you said before we continue the episode. So I love the way when you said I was still eating flesh and secretions, because that's exactly what it is. And when you say it that way, like my first impulse was to go, and that's how you should feel, because that's exactly what you're doing. Someone else's secretions and flesh is what you're eating. And we have to understand that, right? That's the first thing. So I love how you explained it.
Well, I think we need to talk about it as it is, because that was the first conversation with one of my grandchildren. He was 3 at the time. He's 6 now. And I guess they don't eat junk food, but one of the grandparents was inviting him out to McDonald's for a cheeseburger. And he said, "Oh, do you want to go for a cheeseburger?" And I said, "No, I don't eat cows and I don't eat baby calves' milk." And he's a very thoughtful little guy, and he didn't say a word. And then it was about a couple of weeks later, his father came back to me with a little bit of a nasty text and said, "Stop brainwashing my children." And Sailesh tells a beautiful story, Dr. Sailesh Rao, of how Vegan World 2026 came about. And he just told his granddaughter, Kamaya, he would never lie to her. And I said, I'm not brainwashing them, because it goes the other way. Actually, you're brainwashing them, but that's okay. I'm going to respect your sovereignty. I'm never going to lie to my grandchildren. I told him lovingly, I'm not going to lie to my grandchildren. And that's a cow, and that's baby calf's milk. And so there's been lots of conversations in the last 3 years since that conversation, and just saying it how it is, not candy coating things so it makes it seem better, like, pork. It's a pig, and often it's a piglet in celebrations, and yeah.
Yeah. And Dr. Sailesh Rao, I know him. He's a friend, and he's so gentle in the way he tells the story. I know I've had him tell the story on the podcast about his pinky promise to his granddaughter about, fighting for her future, basically, and kids her age, and to end the cruelty to all sentient beings. I have those same struggles. My grandson is not vegan as of yet. My daughter isn't as well. And, when he asks me things, I tell him, and my daughter gets mad and she goes, "Don't brainwash." Same scenario. And, and I'm like, I'm just telling the truth. This is it, and he, so when I go to visit, and I'll go rent a room and he'll stay with me. We'll eat just vegan and he loves it. Right. And then we'll go shopping. He goes, "Abby, is this vegan?" And he'll like whatever, or he'll tell me, "Oh, mom made this, but I'm sorry, it wasn't vegan," kind of a thing. So
so sweet. How old is he?
He's 10 now.
Oh, that's great. And that's how we influence by staying in our integrity and just serving in vegan food, that's staying in our integrity and our truth.
Mm-hmm. And he's been like this, since, I could remember, as he was smaller, because, I've been vegan. And so, I'll feed him vegan food. And like when I go to Florida, we'll go, "Where's the best restaurant we're going to?" And it's Ethos. It's a vegan restaurant, and he loves it there. So, the food is good. He loves the food and it's healthy for him. But, so many people have been conditioned and they don't want to listen to what we're saying, which is the truth. You need to open up your eyes and see what you have been fed all this time. And nobody's at fault. This is just the way society has been. But it's time to open up the door to the truth and to move on and away from the cruelty.
Mm-hmm. And as Dr. Will Tuttle says in the World Peace Diet, we were just following orders.
Right. Another friend of mine, and yes, and also another gentle message conveyor of a peace movement, which is what veganism is, peace for all. So let's talk about, you are a coach, nutrition coach, as you said, and you're also an author of Earth Gut. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, thank you for asking. I did a master's on the microbiome, lifestyle, plant-based nutrition, lifestyle, and the microbiome interface. And so the book came out of a vision from when I was healing Crohn's, and I was told actually in a near-death experience that I would write a book to help people with their gut, and that the gut is the epicenter of all health and disease. And so right around the time I was diving into my book, I was also finishing my master's thesis, and my son died. And so I had a great opportunity to, maybe that's a weird way of saying it, but I retreated for a while from my life. And my son came to me in a dream 17 days after he died, and it was very telepathic. And he basically said, "Mom, I got to feel all the love that he had for me." And the message he conveyed was, "Mom, you're amazing. You can do anything." And I was in a little bit of a stuck place because it had been a couple of years he was struggling with his health, and you don't get very motivated in that place. But it really fueled me to help everyone that, I could possibly help. And a book is one way to do that. A book, documentaries change people like there's no tomorrow. And that's eventually what I hope to see happen with the Million Vegan Grandmothers, that we come together and we do a documentary as we start to, I think one of the first vegan marches will be the marches for the cows, as a feminine issue across the world. How are they going to be able to ignore that?
That is awesome. And, that's another thing that baffles me, is that when you explain and say, that the most abused animals are the females, just like we are considered, even though people seem to think not, we're still second-class citizens in the world. More so in other places than here in Canada or United States, but still, it's again people trying to pull the shades over your eyes to say, no, you've come a long way. Well, we've come some way, but we are not there yet. And when you explain to them how the female animals also, and the gentlest animals, are the ones that are abused, and people don't see that, and don't say, hey, you're right, I'm gonna help stop this abuse, and I'm gonna change how I live my life. It doesn't happen, and it's sad.
Well, we're the protectors of the children. And so if you want to break down a society, break down the feminine, divine, and that will break down the family system and the children. And if you take away the power of the feminine, who is the natural protector, they often think of men as protectors, and that they do, but in the ancient cultures where women were still really held in high regard, they were the ultimate protectors, and the men held the space to make sure that followed through, that there was a follow through on that. And in the cultures where women are held in such high regards, especially the grandmothers, that's where they went to. They had a grandmother council. It wasn't a bunch of men making the decision. It was a grandmother council who got the last word, and it got to decide whether they were doing it in love or fear and power, because the grandmothers have a ferocious love. And any grandmother, or even people around beautiful children that are deeply connected to them, know that the grandmother energy is very, very important in the grandchild's life. And I didn't have that from a grandmother. And so I never really understood when people used to tell me, oh, my grandmother died and I'm having such a hard time getting over it. And I used to think, well, they weren't a parent, and that's kind of interesting. And now that I'm a grandmother, and my grandchildren and I have this ferocious bond and love, I so get it. There's an understanding and a love that happens that, is unshakable. And I do believe we're moving into a vegan world. As Sailesh, vision was 2026. I think Will had a year not too far from that, Dr. Will Tuttle. And I believe that by then, 50% of the world is going to be vegan. That's the space I'm holding for the world. And getting back to Earth Gut, the subtitle is called The Story of Peace, Love, and Microbes. And that's what we're going to see in 2026. We're all going to understand about peace. We're all going to understand about unconditional love that a grandmother feels for her grandchildren. And microbes. We're going to understand that it's not the germ theory. We don't have to run around and be fearful, even of super viruses, which is what's happening. What we need to do is get connected so deeply to the ancient and good microbes of the earth that our gut can take care of mostly everything. In a toxic world where they're using more and more chemicals, we need to develop our own really super healthy microbiome so that we can, because we're mostly virus, bacteria, fungi, and yeast. That's what the microbiome is composed of. Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing. And I believe it too, but the world will be vegan. Most people will change and the other ones will have to come kicking and screaming because it's unsustainable. the life that we're living, not the vegans, but the other individuals, the flesh eaters, because you can't continue to do what they're doing to animals and to the earth, where, using up all the soil, all the water, and then, leaving it trashed for us. And then soon we're going to realize that a burger is not worth more than water or air or earth.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's just undeniable. Now tell me about a million vegan grandmothers and what is our goal, because I'm on.
Yay! Well, right now, our homepage is under climatehealers.org, and you can join us. We have meetings every second week. We've just moved them to the evening to make it a little, in North America, a little bit more convenient for people. We used to meet Wednesday mornings. Our meeting is our Wednesday nights now. And you'll see that link right on climatehealers.org under the calendar. You can just join us. We have really formed a deep bond in the last 3 months. And in the last couple of months, we've written at least 14 letters. They're all on Climate Healers. They can all be replicated, and please do that. Go on there, grab the letter. We've written everything from the milk program in schools, trying to get them plant-based, and all the support that goes along with that. They're well-written letters to saying to the Canadian government, we're not okay with baby seal clubbing. That's still going on. And my partner said to me, that's still going on? And I said, yeah, they just went undercover. A lot of people don't know that, but it's still happening. And those are the grandchildren. Those are the grandbabies, the grandpuppies of us all, right? It's not just our human babies, but we're here to protect all the babies of the earth. So the grandmothers, we've really been big on letter writing lately. And we sponsored the first ever Vegan Earth Day March this year. Climate Healers, a million vegan grandmothers. Serena Farb and Chelsea Davis, lovely women I interviewed on my podcast, The Million Vegan Grandmothers. And not mine, but the Grandmothers podcast. I'm hoping eventually more grandmothers will be interviewing people. The grandmothers came together as a vision. It was a vision that I shared with a friend of mine, including Judy Carmen, who's also a grandmother, whose last book has kind of gone, is a lot of our catchphrase, Homo Ahimsa, who we really are, and how we're going to change the world, and why it matters. Why it matters that we're Homo Ahimsa, meaning we've changed from a Homo sapien species to a one of Ahimsa, meaning non-harm, non-violence. And I shared this vision with Judy, and she's like, and at first I thought it was going to be 1,000. And she goes, no, there's 1 million of us. We're going to come together easily. When we crunch the numbers and look at how many vegans there are at least 1 million vegan grandmothers out there. So we need to join together. The grandmothers need to join together so that when we want to speak out for the cows across the world, we do our march the same day. And how can that be ignored? Where we're marching for all the cows, to bring awareness to what actually happens to a cow, how their babies are stolen, how they're raped in a rape rack, and how everything about the feminine divine is destroyed in that moment of us having the secretions for our coffee or the beloved cheese that so many people love that they can get vegan style. People need to know, because once you know, you can't unknow. And once you see, you can't not see. And my partner and I are writing a book right now, through our work with the Million Vegan Grandmothers. And it's called Grief Mapping. There's been a lot of grief for a lot of people over time. And especially these last few years, a lot of people have lost people. But we're also in extreme amounts of eco-grief and grief for the animals. And so this is an inclusive book. It's taking what so many writers write about, human grief, and we're going to talk about inclusive grief. But it's steps on how to move from immobilized, Kubler-Ross stages, maybe denial and apathy, to right out of right into feeling the felt sense shock, and then empathy, and then moving into creative action, because I believe that that is the only way we're going to change things. We have to allow ourselves to feel the shock of what's happening in the world, not just look the other way. As Judy Carmen says, it's hard to look, but we must. And I believe that people, they don't have enough room in their psyche and their soma, in their physical being. They have so much accumulated grief, they're having such a hard time looking. So I think one of the future visions for the grandmothers is to free up room in our psyche, whatever old grief we have, whatever old trauma we have, so that we can move into being able to deal with the grief of the planet right now and the animals. Yeah.
That is awesome. I just want to read one thing here before we go, and just to mention that even though it's called the Million Vegan Grandmothers, that anybody could join your organization there. So it says, we, the Million Vegan Grandmothers and Wisdom Carriers, join together using the power of love for the children and grandchildren of all beings, and for Mother Earth. Welcome are all people, regardless of gender, age, and official grandmother status, who align with the values of veganism and this declaration. So I just want to make sure everybody knows that even though it's a million vegan grandmothers, that people can sign up and stay updated on what the group is doing.
Thank you so much for reading that, because that declaration is really powerful for us. The only requirement is veganism, and we need them all. We want our grandchildren to join. We want our friends to join. We want Sailesh is a part of it. My partner's a part of it, because when the grandmothers join together in council, they're not alone. They're with their whole tribe. And our tribe is pretty global. It's growing rapidly, and it's veganism. And we don't have to be afraid of that word anymore. You know, we don't have to nice it over with plant-based and go part way. We need to be veg for the animals.
Yes. Thank you, Tami, so much for being on the show. It's been informative. You've been delightful. And I'm definitely going to join your Million Vegan Grandmothers.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Until our next episode, please live a life of kindness, a lifestyle that benefits your health, the planet, and all living beings. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. Live vegan.